This episode is presented by BetOnline. BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for betting on all the madness. Whether you're a seasoned fan or a first-time bettor, BetOnline is your ultimate game day companion. With the largest selection of odds on everything from college basketball to a $200,000 bracket contest, BetOnline continues to be your number one sports betting source. From every Cinderella story to every hat trick, BetOnline has you covered with odds, stats, and more for every game, every play, and every win. BetOnline, the game starts here. On the Rink Shrinks is a senior writer covering the NFL for Sports Illustrated, delivering the biggest stories and breaking news from across the league. He has been on the NFL beat since 2005 and joined Sports Illustrated in 2016. He is also a father of three and a heavily involved youth sports dad. Welcome to the Rink Shrinks podcast, Albert Breer. How we doing?
I feel like that's kind of an insult, like heavily involved, right? Like, a lot of people like
aren't we all though?
The guy yelling from the stands at the ref, right?
Yeah, the helicopter.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's great. Thank you for taking the time, Albert.
You got it.
We've heard all about you. You know what I mean? Heavily involved sports dad.
All the refs know about me. Yeah. The other parents are texting about me. All of it. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Hey, I'm going to be writing about you on Monday morning there, ref.
Yeah, right.
Oh, it's great. Well, Albert, just, like Mott said, we're excited to have you. Obviously, give a little bit of a different perspective from a coaching. We're typically talking to the coaches and the parents and the players, but, just talk about, I would say to start things off here, obviously you've been involved in covering sports, but how did you get involved in loving sports as a youth in general, right? Like everything.
Yeah, I mean, it really, I think like so many other people, my dad, my dad grew up in the Midwest and, he played football growing up and sort of handed that down to me. And I was honestly you guys grew up around here, so I devoured the Boston Globe sports page when I was a kid. Will McDonough and Dan Shaughnessy and Peter Gammons. I mean, I don't think we even knew it when we were kids, like what an all-star team we were reading there, Right. And it's amazing when you go around the country, like how many television personalities, reporters, writers are from Boston in different places across the country. And I think it's because of that, it's because we all were exposed to that growing up. So like any other kid growing up around here, I played every sport growing up. I didn't play hockey, but I played just about everything else, tried just about everything else, played, football through high school. And, my grades weren't very good in high school. And my dad basically said, I needed to do something to beef up my college application. And, so he called the sports editor at the Sudbury Town Crier. It was John Tomasi at the time, believe it or not, who became a pretty big deal around here. And so it really started with me covering, a couple teams. Actually, it really started with me writing about the team I was on. I started writing about the high school football team I was playing for, and then after that, he said, you got a little bit of an ability here, and I think it was almost by osmosis. The funny thing is, I was terrible in English. I was good in math. Math was what I was able to do. I was not good with English and writing and all of that. But for some reason, I think just by osmosis, having read the Globe, I could write sports, Wow. And so, started with, writing off of the games. I would write for the next, play on Friday night. And then, the next Monday, I would have to write the recap for the weekly town paper, which came out on Thursday. And, John said, well, you're pretty good at this. You want to try, covering a sport that you're not playing. So, I think I did a little girls basketball back then for a junior in high school. That's pretty cool. Yeah. And then I just kind of one thing led to another where I was, so I can make pretty easy money doing this. And, I was getting paid $50 a story, which when you're that age is, and back then was, pretty good money. So,
right.
I always knew I wanted to be involved in sports. I loved it that much, and so I think, I always thought I'd coach or be a general manager or something like that. That'd be the track I'd get on. And it just so happened that this was something that I think I showed a little bit of an ability for early on. And, then when I started looking at schools, it was probably one thing that stuck out, on my application. And, so I go to Ohio State, covered the football team there, and just sort of follow the path up, so it was something that happened very, very organically. It's not like I had anybody in my family who was ever involved in journalism or anything like that. Like my dad was a stockbroker, and then worked for his family company. Most of the people in my family worked in business. My mom was a real estate agent. It was just something that happened very, very organically for me.
Well, I just love the fact that it really was based on your love for sport, though, right? And then your dad kind of kicking you in the rear end to do something to kind of separate yourself from the herd. But how was that writing about your own team? Like that dynamic?
I didn't know any better. Like that was the thing about it. It was just like, all right, I just, it was a little weird, like talking to my coach, and getting quotes from my coach. That was a little strange. But
you want to know what you could have done better on Friday night?
Yeah. I mean, but it was honestly, it was just a shit he yelled at us about, 2 hours before anyway. So and my high school coach, I think a lot of people have this story. Like my high school coach probably had the biggest impact of any male in my life outside of my dad. Right. Yeah. It was something that, I did the best I could with what was put in front of me. And, it just seemed easy. It didn't seem like work. You know what I mean? Like, and that I think is the best advice I can give any kid is like, if, you're doing something you love, I guess the saying goes, you won't work a day in your life. Like it just didn't feel like I don't mind doing this at all. You know what I mean? Like, so when I say it was organic, it really was. Like there was nothing that was forced about it. It just sort of happened. And, obviously I'm glad it did.
Yeah, it worked out. I want to know what was the stat line for you as a player at Lincoln Sudbury High School?
Not great. We don't need to get into that.
We don't want to get into
varsity letters.
Two varsity letters.
I was a workman-like defensive end, tight end. Yeah. So,
I love it. So now your time at Ohio State, great football program, and going through there as an undergrad and covering the team and just working on your craft. Were there any in particular episodes or cool stories that you can think of off the top of your head as kind of where you're like, all right, this is pretty cool when you're covering like a big time program?
Yeah, I would say it was like for me, like it was. I just had, it sort of desensitized me to how when I got to finally cover the NFL, like it didn't seem too big for me because I was basically covering a pro sport. And I was in class with some of those guys, you know what I mean? Like, so like the guys I was covering were my age. And, I always say that I still say this to people that I'm covering. I'm like, I look at all of these, all the relationships that I have in the NFL, they're all 30-year relationships for me. Like if I do it right, like I'm going to have these relationships for a long time. A lot of the guys that I covered when I first started, when I first started in the NFL, they were like me, they were position coaches. They were around my age, working their way up, trying to make it, and so like when I was in college at Ohio State, it's like, I don't know, like there were guys on the team that I was very friendly with. And, I think that part of it was important was, how important relationship building is and how important it is to be accountable to the people around you. There were definitely some situations that were different. Like I covered a coach getting fired. Like I covered John Cooper getting fired. So that was valuable. I covered things really coming undone at the end of the Cooper era. Like the morning after the spring game, this would have been my junior year. We had a linebacker named Marco Cooper, who was a 5-star kid from Detroit. And he got busted the morning after the spring game, passed out in a pickup truck with a bag full of ecstasy, 3 guns, hollow point bullets, all the works. You know what I mean? And so like, then I'm sort of thrust into covering something that's like a real life case. You know what I mean? Like, so there were a ton of experiences like that, I mean, if I didn't go to a school like that, I wouldn't have been able to cover that. You know what I mean?
Right,
like, so I don't think Ohio State had the greatest journal. Like, it isn't known. Like, I don't want to denigrate the school. It isn't known the way like Syracuse or Northwestern or Missouri or the big journalism schools are. But I would argue like the experience that I got just from getting to cover that, like that's not different than covering the NFL. So, I mean, my experience was excellent. I had, great people around me there too. And it was just, again, like, it's just like, you want to talk about like a real life application for what your job's going to be. Like covering the football team at Ohio State was about as real as it gets when, it comes to getting to cover something that's like a professional sport.
And can you believe the difference in today's day with like NIL money and all that type of stuff? It just must be, I know this is like, totally a little bit off topic, but it must just be like wild to even imagine like these kids. I mean, I remember getting the golden handshake from my father, getting $20 after a game. And you're like, oh, wow, I can, afford whatever it was, right? A sub tomorrow or maybe something to drink. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I remember there was a kid. So, one of my fraternity brothers, one of his good friends was I think the kid's name was Jesse Klein. So a bunch of my fraternity brothers were from this town right outside Columbus, Upper Arlington, which is where Jack Nicklaus is from, and like great athletic tradition in that town. And I remember, his dad, when he got a scholarship at Ohio State, the scholarship to play football at Ohio State, his dad gave him a truck because it was like, well, I saved up all this money for you to go to college anyway. Right. And I'm not going to have to pay it. So I'm going to buy you a truck now. So like, that was like, like back then, like that's what it was. Well, you know what I mean? Like, so it's a lot different, but I do think, it's interesting. You bring that up, Brian, cause it's like, I mean, this has been big business for a long time. Yeah. You know what I mean? College football has been big business for a long, long time. So there were some inequities with this to begin with, in the way that it always ran. And I think like this has been a long time coming. They should have got ahead of this way ahead of time. There'd be way more structure to it.
Yeah. Do you think it's like a can of worms that like a can of worms that was opened without any structure?
Yeah. I mean, it's like if they had just, I mean, that's why it kills me that the NCAA president ran away from this right before the shit hit the fan. You know what I mean? Because it's like you had all this time to get ahead. You knew this was coming. Like this was eventually going to happen. Like, and for some reason you didn't get ahead of it, So it's interesting though, talking to NFL guys about it because, like there's good and bad to it. Like, so, when they're scouting kids coming out of college now, one of the big questions for a lot of them, because the backgrounds of a lot of the football players coming into the pros is like, how is a kid going to handle having money? Right. Now it's sort of answered for them already. You know what I mean? Like, because the kids have already had money. So the kids who are going to screw up when they get some money in their pocket have already screwed up, Yeah. So it's definitely changed the landscape. And I think, now you're starting to see, I think with the NFL players, like where they are already sort of businessmen when it comes to handling their careers, going into the league. Like Marvin Harrison Jr. is a good example of it last year where he skipped everything. I'm not running a 40 for you. I'm not, I don't need to do this, or this. That's only going to hurt me. I'm going to be the first receiver taken regardless. And he winds up going 4th overall. And I think you're seeing like more of that now, like where kids have a better understanding of the position that they're in because they were forced to take on that responsibility when they're 18, 19 years old.
No. Yeah, that's a good point, because like you see a lot of the negatives on how it's gone down, and in particular, the bigger sports and football, basketball, hockey isn't as in college as big with the NIL, but there is some deals out there, but it's real money, right? So you have to be educated enough or surround yourself with people who can educate you, and those life experiences, like you're saying, can definitely help them, transition. And on the other side, from ownership or, a coaching staff or who's scouting, that outside, distraction that was so prevalent for so long should be, minimized or taken care of prior to going into an NFL organization.
Yep. Yeah, for sure. And, I think it's, It's interesting. I just think they have to, like, I personally feel like they just need to find a way to structure it, because I don't think it helps anybody when a kid's jumping around to 4 and 5 schools. Like, that kid probably won't make it anyway. Like, he may not wind up with a degree. He's probably not going to be, plugged into one of the professional networks. And you guys know how powerful those are. Like, if you're a 3 or a 4 year player at a major college, like, those guys all take care of each other, outside of the sport. Right. And so a kid's going to miss that experience. But there are other people. Like, I got a good buddy of mine. He was a priority walk-on at Ohio State. So he was a year ahead of me. I played high school football with him. He's like a really good friend of mine. And his daughter, she's using the transfer portal. So she played soccer at Oklahoma, played for 3 years, was a captain there, tore her Achilles, got her degree in 3 years there. And then she used the transfer portal to go get her law degree at Creighton, which is awesome. You know what I mean? Like, it's incredible. Right. So like there are people, I think there is a way that this can be really useful for a lot of people. But I just think, I personally feel like it's become the Wild West because the people who could have gotten ahead of it didn't get ahead of it, and then basically ran out of a house that was on fire and left everybody else to put the fire out.
Right. No, that's great insight there, and really appreciate your thoughts on it. I'm sure we could spend way more time talking about it. Right. But I want to get into, just being a hockey dad, a sports dad. We mentioned pre-show, obviously you have 3 kids that are playing, that are involved in sports. You coaching football, your son's playing hockey, lacrosse, all that type of stuff. So, how's that experience gone for you?
It's great. I just, like, I want him at the end, like, I want him to have the experience I had, which was, I played through high school. I wound up loving it, and it gave me such great lessons and, like, life lessons, like, I don't think I learned, like, I think it taught me how to work hard. You know what I mean? Right. Like, it taught me, like, what hard work was. And it, taught me to build relationships and rely on people. And, there's so many great lessons that can come from it. And I just, I would hope that my kids have that experience, that I can give them that experience where, they play through they play a sport or 2 or 3 through high school, and they have a great experience with it, and they take those lessons with them. And if for some reason they overcome their genetics and wind up playing in college, then that's great. That's a bonus. You know what I mean? But I think, like, I think the healthy way, at least from my perspective, like, I think what's healthy is, like, hope that your kid has a great experience, expose them to everything, which is what I've tried to do. And I don't have it all figured out. I don't want to sound like I do, but, like, I said this to you guys before the show, like, I with my kids, I'm trying to keep as much of it alive as I possibly can. Like, keep them playing as many of the sports as I possibly can for as long as they can. So because they change their mind all the time, so like, when they're 13 or 14 years old and you actually have to make those decisions, like, what am I going to play in high school? Like, they've been exposed to all of it. So there's the highest possible chance that they're going to find 2 or 3 of them that they like enough to play into high school. You know what I mean? Like, and, I can just tell you, like, I know, this is probably, like, a bigger conversation, but the whole thing with specialization kind of, like, I don't know, like, it just bothers me because I know the experience I had, and I just know from the people I cover, like, just take the best quarterbacks in the NFL. Pat Mahomes would tell you the reason why he can throw off platform and sidearm is because he played shortstop in baseball. Joe Burrow would tell you that he's got such great presence in the pocket because he was a great basketball player. So he had to learn about space, right? Like, and he had to have spatial awareness, when he's going up for a rebound. Josh Allen, like, his ability to create, I think he would tell you, is because he's just a baller, and he did it in every different sport, right? Like, so there's this element of having to figure it out. He's not a robot out there. You know what I mean? Like, and I've just seen it at so many different levels where it's like, like the multi-sport experience is a really good one. And I think it's healthy too. And that, like, your kid's got a better shot of loving what he's doing if he keeps mixing it up and he's doing different things.
Yep.
I absolutely love that message, and the examples behind it from what from these players, and as far as what we try to preach is being an athlete first, and going into that specialization is very difficult when you have youth who, like say hockey or baseball or whatever sport it is, realizing that they can make some money on, offering more and whatnot. But I love your approach, and I hope that a lot of people take to it, because exposing your kids to as many athletic endeavors as possible, and giving your body somewhat of a rest, and then also the network of people or teams is different kids, and you have to be social in different ways. And I just think the overall benefits of playing other sports, not just athletically with those transferable skills sets like you were saying, is also like the social side of it as well.
What's cool too, Mott's, like I think is like, and I if your kid is really proficient at one sport and great at one sport, and then he's got to learn to be a role player in another sport, like those are life lessons. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Like if he's got to be like the guy who is grinding it out in one sport and doing something to create a play for another guy, like that's his role in one sport, but he's the playmaker in another sport, like that's great. You know what I mean? Like then he's getting to learn those things. And when he's in his 20s and 30s, like those are things that are going to apply to real life. You know what I mean? Like, because there are going to be times in your life when you're the guy out front, and there are going to be the times in your life when you're not, like, and I just, like I said, like, I think sports is such a great training ground for life. You know what I mean? No matter how good you are at them, you can be like a really high level athlete. You can be a guy who just played through high school like me, you know what I mean? Like, but there are awesome lessons for all the kids there. And I just, to me, it's like, I think like giving them that, and there's science behind it too. I'm sure you guys know this, right? Like lights are going out on me. Sitting still on there. There is science behind it too. Like
we started talking about science, and Mott's just shut off.
I gotta go. But there's science behind it too. Like like about like the injury rate and everything else. I'm sure you guys are familiar with this stuff. But like,
absolutely.
I remember talking to Tom House about this. And Tom House was Tom Brady's throwing coach, and wound up. His old company now is run by some other guys who have, I think it's something like 2/3 of the starting quarterbacks in the NFL work with them. And, like there's science behind it. I remember Tom said to me something along the lines of like, it was a kid should not be specializing until he's at least 13 or 14, and probably not till he's 17 or 18. Right. And a lot of it is about like the development of the body and working different muscles and everything else. And, it sort of goes back to like, I remember my high school football coach saying to us, like, I want you to play other sports because those sports will teach you stuff that I can't. Right. I thought that was a really good way of putting it. You know what I mean? Like that there's stuff that you're going to do in other sports that are going to help you in this sport over here, and you don't even know it's happening, but it is,
I think just fighting through that adversity is, like you said, just maybe not being the best player, or figuring out your role is just huge in life lessons in general. And then, similar to what you just said, I think, once these kids get to, especially for hockey players, I would say it's just such a, it is a little bit of a different sport, right? It's kind of a longer season than like if you're a Pat Mahomes and it's a football and baseball, right? You're talking about two different seasons. To a degree. Obviously there's going to be some summer camps and stuff like that, but I think it just teaches you those lessons with hockey that you have to work, and you have to put in the work in the off season and train. And I just think the injury prevention as well, and using other muscles, we see so many injuries in the hockey world with kids with their hips and groins and those type of things, and it's not good, and a lot of people, it ends up really hurting their careers.
It's overuse, right? Like,
yes,
because you're
100%.
Because if you're only playing one sport, you're pounding the same muscle over and over and over again, and then you have other muscles. Not to get too scientific here, I don't want to. I want to shut the lights off there. But there are other muscles that become underdeveloped, and there's physiology to all of that. Like, and I think it's my experience, and again, like I think it's at this age, like at the age my kids are at, it's just like, it just seems crazy to me. Like it just does. It just seems crazy to me that you're already narrowing it down and deciding what they're going to like when they're 16. Like I don't know what my kid's going to like in 20 minutes. You know what I mean? And that's okay. And that's okay. You know what I mean? Like, it's just, and that's sort of like why I've tried to keep as much of this stuff alive as I possibly can for him.
Well, I love that.
My younger ones are just doing everything still. So,
right.
But I do think it's interesting too. You brought up a good point there, like where there is that part, like where it goes from they're just playing games to now you're doing drill work and you're doing stuff that might not be as fun, which is something I'm going through this like a little bit with both my boys, my daughter not yet, but like, it's like there's that part of it, right? Like where it goes from, all right, I'm just out here playing games and scoring goal, whatever it is. And then all of a sudden you're in a practice and you're doing stuff that like it definitely relates to how well you play the game. But when you're that age, you don't have like a real concept of that. You know what I mean? And you have to learn that.
Yep. No.
Yeah. And in hockey in particular, it's not a real natural movement. You're not being linear. So, that's why injury prevention, like BY is talking about, is very important as the development of the muscles. But, it's something that, we've just been talking about is offsetting that with playing other sports and developing other, muscles, to give those hockey muscles a break. And we talk about it often, but, we love baseball. I love baseball, but it was something that, mentality as well. It's a nice break from, the fluidity of hockey, but also you have to be mentally prepared. When the ball gets hit to you and you're in the batter's box, it's like you're on an island. It's the most individualistic team sport out there, but it's just a nice break. So like just having that approach that you have is very refreshing to hear. And I hope a lot of parents take to it. It's not easy to do. But
and I think it's like in a lot of cases, I think sometimes, I don't know if you guys have this experience. I feel like sometimes like the club atmosphere, like to some degree, and look, we're involved in it too. So I'm not holier than thou, right? Like, but I do think to some degree, like I have to guard myself against it sometimes. Like sometimes the clubs are preying on the parents' insecurities, right? Like, and it's not even the kid, it's the parents' insecurities. It's like, well, my kid wants to keep playing nonstop. My kid really loves it. And oh yeah, like there are these 5 other kids over here that are just as good as my kid. And if my kid's not playing nonstop, he's going to fall behind those 5 kids. Right. Like I think I do think that there's like a psychological thing where to some degree it's preying on that insecurity, right? Of the parent thinking like, if my kid's not doing this nonstop, like I'm putting him behind the 8 ball, which really isn't true.
Right. Oh, there's a big sell in that, especially in the hockey world. Well, yeah,
where skating's so important. Like that's one thing I've learned about hockey. I can barely skate. I mean, I think there are some parents here in Duxbury who still have video of me going out in the dads. They convinced me to play in the big mistake, like big. They're holding it over you. Like, yeah, get out there.
You're just like, is that why you came on our show? It was like I just got to get ahead of this.
I took the opening face off, and I legitimately, I don't even know how to take a face off. Like I barely skate, and like so I get out there, and like my reference point for like taking a face off is like the cover of NHL '94, what they look like on there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I lean back, and then all of a sudden, and I've skied since I was little, so I can function out there but I can't do much, right? Like I can do as much as like my ability to ski gives me. And so I leaned down, and then I swear to, I was just like a house of cards, like that onto the back of my head, and people legitimately were concerned, like came over to me after the way I fell and were like, "Are you okay? Are you okay?" And I did finish the game.
I hope you have a helmet on.
But yeah, like I have that's the thing I learned about hockey is like that. It's just like, it's such a, like, I have so much respect for the sport, watching my kid go through it and everything else, and seeing the other kids and all of that. And like, it makes me watch it differently now. because it's so different because like just the act of skating is like, it's everything, you know what I mean? If you're not doing it a lot, like, and I've experienced that too. I've seen it too, like where if you're not doing it a lot, like it's really hard to keep up, you know? And so there's that balance. I think it's probably the hardest sport to balance, right? Like with other sports, because there is a need to like keep your skating where it needs to be.
Yeah, definitely a foundation that we always say you can't be too good of a skater. So it's like, even if you're a good skater, you want to continue to work on it, the efficiencies on the edges, and, you know, just really just working at the craft, because it is one of a fundamental foundation pieces that you need to be a good hockey player, you know? So it's, even at the highest level, you see NHL guys working on their skating and like those edge work stuff. So I wouldn't beat yourself up too much.
But it's like, no. I trust me. Like I have a ton. I was at a tryout tonight. Which is the other thing that's interesting is you guys, your sport, man, the tryouts are
so crazy,
way ahead of time.
Yeah. Got to lock in the deposits though.
I am blown away. Like I'm blown away by every kid out there, what they can do. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like it really is amazing. Like just, and I'm sure you guys lack perspective on this because you guys were hockey players, but it really, for somebody who can barely, like an adult who can barely skate watching it, it's like, holy crap. Like every last one of them, like the best of the, like every last one of them is a really good skater, you know?
You can get around. Yeah, no, it's pretty impressive.
It is. And I think it's just, it goes to the fundamentals, right? And just being really good at them. Like, and you watch it, and I'm sure just covering, especially the NFL, like how much do those players work on just the little things, right? Yeah. Like just whether it's throwing and catching, right? Or speed drills, right?
So, I've got a great example of that. Like, so
love it.
And I put this up on my Instagram and on Twitter when Jamar Chase got his deal the other day. So, Jamar is obviously supremely physically gifted, but when he got his contract, I thought about, being out of training camp in 2021, and he had just been drafted 5th overall, and people don't remember it now, but there was like a 2-week stretch where it was almost as if he had the yips, like couldn't catch any. Again, it was bizarre and weird, and one of those things you have a really hard time explaining, but it happened. And like, covering the NFL, like those things become huge stories during training camp because nothing else is happening, right? So I went through there. It was like the first or second week of August where I was on my training camp trip. And after practice that day, I'm out there with the coaches, and I'm like Cincinnati's practice fields are right across the street from their stadium downtown in Cincinnati. So just hanging out with 4 or 5 of the coaches that I know after practice ends. And all the players are inside, and I hear this, right? And I turn around and I see it's Jamar Chase out there, and he's got a teammate with him, and the teammate is sitting there, like basically like punching away at the ball, right? And he's on the jugs, and he's just boom, 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 boom. And I kind of took note of it. I took a little video of it, and then I turn around and I talk with the coach for a little while longer. 5-10 minutes pass. I turn back around. Now that teammate's gone, and Jamar's still out there with an equipment guy, and he's on his knees, and he's catching the ball on his knees. Boom, 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 boom. Yeah. And it just made me, like, when I watch it, I see it, and it's like that was not a show. Like he didn't, like he had no idea anybody else was paying attention. Yeah. And it was like, this guy wants to be the best. You know what I mean? Like, and you look at it, like the fundamental things, like the really great ones do. Like, it was like that, like I filed it away. I was like, this kid's going to make it. You know what I mean? Like, and it's not, I mean, I knew he was a great college player, obviously, and I watched him at LSU and all of that. Like, and I talked to a million people about how great he was going to be coming out of college and everything else. But when I watch that, I see a guy who's supremely gifted and is above the line and all that stuff. And now he's doing that.
Yeah.
Like, and of course, now he's making over $40 million a year. And he won the round. You know what I mean? But I do think, like, there's a ton of good examples. I showed it to my kid, the videos. I showed when I got home from my camp trip, I immediately showed it to my kid. I was like, I was like, don't ever think you're too good to do any of this stuff, right? Don't ever think you're above doing any of this stuff.
That's awesome.
That's great stuff. I mean, just getting back to kind of what you said a little earlier about, we can kind of tie it together with how you approach, kind of parenting or, just being a sports dad. Just relationship driven, like coming through as an athlete, a high school athlete, and pursuing, a profession in sports on the writing side. But just as you're coming through, you're maintaining these relationships. And that's from being within a team, I would guess, you can mention, but, and just really growing with your peers to where they are now. And it's really just it's trust, it's a network, it's really just doing things the right way consistently, which, we always as coaches want our players to do. But ultimately, can you just speak to like kind of combining all that and hoping that your kids understand that type of, approach can lead to so many, opportunities because you put the time in, but you developed great relationships and that you're in a relationship driven business.
I think so much of it's just about treating people the right way. You know what I mean? Like, and learning and being accountable to other people. And like, it's like, for me, I don't know. I've always sort of viewed it like, I remember my dad telling me, like, show me how you treat somebody who can't help you, and I'll tell you who you are. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, how are you treating the person who cannot help you? You know what I mean? Like, because everybody can treat like their boss. Everybody can treat their boss great. Everybody can, but how do you treat the person who doesn't have something to give you? Right.
Yeah.
And I always try to remember that, like in like the way that I cover these people and like the guys down the roster. I don't know, if I, have a great conversation with a guy as a backup tight end, he might wind up being Rob Gronkowski. You know what I mean? Like I can tell you, from my experiences, like the guys that I'm closest to, like I knew Sean McVay when he was a tight ends coach. I knew Kyle Shanahan when he was a receivers coach. I knew Josh McDaniels when he was the quarterbacks coach. And it's just, like you go through your experiences and like how you get to know these people. It's how you treat them when they get fired. You know what I mean? Yeah. Did you treat them with respect when they got fired, or were you going on the radio and yelling about them? Like, it's, at the end of the day, it's like it's just how you treat people. And I think you do learn that in the team environment growing up, because like every day you're in the team environment, you're accountable to all those people around you. You're accountable to your coaches, you're accountable to your teammates. And every day you got to answer to them. And that's sort of, I don't know, it's sort of the approach I try to take to it. And it's like, there are definitely things where my job conflicts with the jobs of the people that I cover, right? Yeah. Where like I have to do something that's not going to be comfortable but I have to be fair to them, right? Like that to me is a non-negotiable. It's like I can be critical of them, I can be tough on them, I can report stuff that they don't want out there, but I have to be fair to them. You know what I mean? Like, and that's, to me, just goes back to how you treat people. That's all. You know what I mean? Like, when someone's down, are you kicking them? You know what I mean? Like I don't know. Like, I think, it's kind of funny. Like I'm saying this, I think of Aaron Rodgers a little bit, like in that, Aaron Rodgers, one thing I respect about him is that he always punches up, and he has a reputation of being a bit of an asshole and a weirdo and all that. Like, but the thing about Aaron is that his teammates love him. You can find an equipment guy in Green Bay who still has nothing bad to say about him. Now, does he have an issue with some of his bosses? Yeah, he has an issue with some of his bosses. But I mean, for the most part, the people who, like when he's swinging up, and I just think so much of it, to me, so much of like the fundamentals of my job come down to, am I being fair to the people that I'm covering? And am I able to maintain relationships in a way I would in my everyday life? And if I can do that, like, I think I can be pretty good at this, because if I can do that, people are going to trust me. People are going to tell me things. My job at the baseline is to know what the hell is going on. And you only find out what the hell is actually going on. And you guys know this, having been in those locker rooms, if you have people's trust. It's the only way, you know?
Right.
And so like, that's sort of like, for me, like what that all boils down to.
That's such a great message.
Yeah, I think, you know, in particular, you do a really good job at covering and, you know, just looking at the information that comes out from, say, the NFL, whether it be, you know, a draft or just team information versus, you know, some of the NHL stuff. Like, you're spot on a lot of stuff because you're getting good information.
Well,
and,
thank
you know,
you.
and you're protecting sources to the degree of, you know, you want to continue to get that information. But as a, you know, football fan, it seems as though, you know, we're gaining more quality information before it gets released or, you know, like along the way. And it's not just throwing, you know, whatever against the wall and hoping that something sticks. It's just really, you know, so I just wanted to, you know, kind of like highlight the NHL versus the NFL, and you're a huge part of that. So keep up the good work.
Yeah. I mean, it's just, it's having like institutional knowledge. Like I said, like it's just, I think as much as anything else, as best you can, like I think my job is to take people where they can't go. And, you know, like, again, like have an idea of what's actually happening and being able to bring context to everything and being able to discuss things intelligently in a way where I'm not talking over people's heads. You know, early in my career, I had that problem where I would try to, you know, I knew the football jargon because I mean, like I played in high school and, you know, I would throw some of those words around, and I stopped doing that because that doesn't serve anybody. That's serving myself. You know what I mean? Like, so you try to say it, you try to deliver it like in an entertaining way where it's digestible for people, where people can, you know, relate with it and digest it and take it in for what it is. And at the end of the day, that's what it is, right? Like, I mean, this is all entertainment, you know? So, you know, like you hope to enhance, you know, the entertainment value people are getting from what you're covering.
No, it's great stuff. It's a great message. Before we let you go here, I want to, you know, what are your thoughts on the, you know, we're New England based here, even though Mott's is up in British Columbia. What are your thoughts on the Patriots, the offseason moves? Obviously, a lot going on down in Foxborough. We got to have a little, like, you know, a little NFL preview here, right?
Yeah, well, Drake may
we got
talk.
the draft coming up. I mean, we got to hit on one or two things here before we let you go.
We can do that for sure. Yeah, no, I think Mike's off to a good start. Yeah, I covered Mike as a player. He, like, I think like you're going to see a real identity in what he's trying to build. And I think, you know, the best coaches, like, you know, when you see it, you know, their teams when you see them, you know what I mean? Like, and with Belichick for all those years, you knew it because they were smart, they were flexible, they were adjustable. They could do all different things. I think with Mike, you're going to see a team that's smart, physical, tough. And I think, you know, one thing that, like, everybody wants to microwave it and like, all right, like, let's get back to 12 wins. And it's not that easy. There's a process to that. And I think a huge part of it is bringing in guys who understand what you're trying to do. And that's why, like, I thought it was really interesting when he said this, he said, like, somebody asked him about like bringing in guys who had connections to his coaching staff, which is exactly what the Commanders did last year. Guys who had connections to Dan Quinn's staff. There were a ton of them. Zach Ertz played for Cliff Kingsbury. Austin Eckler played for Anthony Lynn. Dorrance Armstrong, Dante Fowler, Tyler Biotish were all in Dallas with Joe Witt and Quinn. And then DQ had the background with Bobby Wagner in Seattle. Mike did the same thing. And so Mike was asked about that and kind of, like, you know, in his trademark way, looked at the guy like he had three heads. And he's like, I don't know how else you would do that, you know? And he's right, because in NFL free agency, no one's taking visits. The top free agents don't take visits. They just sign. And so you don't go through the same process you go through when you're drafting a kid. When you're drafting a kid, you got 3 months to do 30 visits, to do on-campus visits, to meet them at the combine, meet them at the Senior Bowl. You get to know them.
Right.
You can't do that in free agency. So a lot of it's going to be based on what you know about the guys. And, you know, more or less, like, every one of these guys that's coming in, with the exception of Milton Williams, they have like incredible background on. So I think what you're going to see is, like, in year one with Mike's team, They have work to do on the offensive line, no question. That needs to be fixed. They can still use help at receiver, but I think what you're going to see is you're going to see a team that plays smart, that has an identity, that's very physical, and I would think you're going to see where they're going. Now, it might not mean more than 6 or 7 wins this year, but I think you're going to see where they're going. And I will say this: I don't know. I can't tell you that Drake May is going to get into the Mahomes, Allen, Burrow, Lamar echelon, but I can tell you he's the right kind of kid. Everybody who's been around him from the time he was in high school has told me that. And so I think he's a good fit for Vrabel, and hopefully they get the most out of Drake and they're able to put enough around him here in the next couple of years, because I think he's got a chance to be really, really special.
That's what I was thinking, like, as far as like building around him, he seems like the guy that can process. And that's one of the biggest things that, you saw since Brady left, guys that can just physically do it versus just, maybe be in a system and understand that it's, on point. And those guys that, kind of have been, freewheeling. But I was surprised at how much, his rushing yards.
Yeah.
Like he had better feet than I ever imagined.
He's a great athlete. Like he was a great high school basketball player. His brothers, I mean, I'm sure you guys know the story, right? Like his brothers.
His whole family, right?
Yeah. 2 brothers played basketball at North Carolina. Another brother played baseball at Florida. His dad was a quarterback at North Carolina. And he's the youngest, which means he got the crap beat out of him a bunch, So I don't know if you guys are younger brothers. I'm the oldest, but the younger brother can be the youngest brother can be pretty tough sometimes, I think.
Yeah. I'm the youngest. I think BY was the bully,
Yeah, I was the oldest, and there's a reason probably why my brother played over 1,000 games in the NHL and I played none, What about can we hit on the draft real quick?
Yeah, sure.
What are you thinking with that, with picks, with the quarterbacks? Obviously, you got Travis Hunter and the Sanders drama. What's going on with that?
Root for Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders to get red hot and go in front of the Patriots. I personally think if Carter or Hunter fall to them, I think that it becomes academic. I think I think those two are sort of above the line, and I think after that, you've got like this clump of players. Well, Campbell's in there, Mason Graham's in there. Depending on who you talk to, Jalen Walker, the linebacker from Georgia, Will Johnson, Jai Barron, like there's a ton of names that are in that clump that are after those two. But if you have a chance to get one of those two, even though like corner is not a huge need for the Patriots, I almost think you could start him at receiver as a rookie and then eventually, work him over there where he can fill a need right now. And then eventually you hope he becomes a two-way player. And I mean, if I'm the Patriots, the guy I'd want most is Carter. I think Carter's got a chance to be very, very special. And and I look at them defensively now where you've got Gonzalez and Carlton Davis at corner. You got all those guys at safety. You've brought in Spillane to play at linebacker. You got Milton Williams and Barmore inside at D tackle. Like if you have a high end edge rusher, and they bring in Harold Landry, but if you have like a guy who's like a real like war daddy on the edge there, like you could wind up being pretty good on defense right now. Yeah. And so like I look at Carter
like a Richard Seymour type back in the day, right? When he changed things.
Yeah. I mean, like Carter, I think Abdul Carter is part of the, like, it's the easy comparison because like Micah Parsons is.
That's probably why I came up with it.
Yeah. Well, no, I'm going to give you the easiest comparison is Micah Parsons. Because he wore the same number, same school, all of it. But he is like that in that like he can do so many different things. Like you can play him off the line, you can play him on the line, you can move him around. And he's such, I mean, if you guys haven't done it, go and anybody out there listening, go pull up like the 5-minute YouTube highlights. Like he looks like he's shot out of a cannon. He looks like he's like got the explosiveness of a receiver playing defensive end. So like I would say, you hope one of those two fall to you. And if that doesn't happen, then it'd be hard not to take an offensive lineman. That might be Will Campbell. We can go through that whole short arms thing if you guys want. And whether or not he's a tackle. Membu from Missouri is a guy a lot of people like a lot. I think it's weird. It's a weird draft year because generally if you're like in the top 10, you don't want to draft for need. You want to draft quality. Like, can we find a real blue chip player? And then, when you get off the cliff, like when get to that second level, now teams start drafting for need a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
That'll happen faster this year than we've seen in past years, because I think those two are way above the rest of the group.
I think Jersey Shore wants to pop in here.
All right,
Producer for a question.
Yeah.
This should be a real doozy.
Thanks, PY. So Bert, I guess my biggest concern is just looking at the offense, and there basically is no offense aside from Drake May, and he's got no protection on the offensive line. There's no center, nothing. So what do you make of them cutting David Andrews, and how do they go about protecting Drake May and giving him the protection that he needs to be able to be a presence in the pocket and be able to, hell, he even needs he needs players to throw to other than, I guess, Kendrick Bourne and Kayshon Boutte?
Yeah. It's a good question. Like I think at left tackle, they would have made a run at Ronnie Stanley, and they were planning on offering him more than he got from the Ravens. So that was, obviously Stanley's a third contract guy, so I think driven a little bit less by money. And the Ravens put something compelling in front of him. They made a run at Dan Moore, who wound up in Tennessee and making $21 million a year. So, they've tried at left tackle. It's just, you can't snap your fingers and make that happen. And the problem is, it's like one of those positions, right? Like if they have a left tackle now, like we're probably looking at this a little bit differently. The problem is, like, left tackle is one of those positions where if you've got a good one, you're not letting them go. Mm-hmm. And so it's very rare. It happened with Ronnie Stanley. If you've got a really good one, you're generally not letting them go. And if somebody is letting one go, well, then the question has got to be like, why did they let them go? And there's usually a reason behind it. Right. That's why that position, you almost always have to draft it. So, like, can they get creative? Is there a way? Is there somebody that they really like that might be slips to the bottom of the first round where they can trade up out of the top of the second round to go and get them? If they don't wind up addressing it at 4, they're going to have to address that somewhere early in the draft. At receiver, I would just tell you, like, it might be hard to find a true number one. Like, there's no, like last year you had Marvin Harrison and Malik Neighbors and Rome Odunze, and I don't know that the guys like your Tet McMillans or your Matthew Goldens are at that level this year. But receiver is a position where you've been able to find guys deep into the second, third, and fourth rounds in the past. And it's because, again,
but why aren't they going after a guy like DK Metcalf?
So the DK Metcalf thing's interesting. I think as much as anything, he was going to have a say in where he wanted to go, because like he only had a year left on his contract, and no one was going to fork over a second round pick without having him sign long term. Mm-hmm. I also think like that Vrabel and his staff are being very careful about what they bring in year one. And I don't think this is going to be this way forever, because I think they will eventually start to take risks. But I think they're being very intentional about who they bring in. I think it's one of the reasons why Laramie Tunsil was a non-starter for them too. If you can get to the point after a year where Dan Quinn and his staff are, now they can start taking chances, right? Because they feel like they've got the foundation and the culture established. So I think it was with DK, it was sort of a culture thing, and part of it maybe that they felt like they couldn't lure him here because he was going to have some say over that. But again, like I would say, like you look at the receiver position, again, there's a bigger thing, right? But because of 7-on-7 and because of YouTube and all that, a lot of the best athletes playing football play receiver. So there's more depth every year at that position than there was 20 or 30 years ago, which is how you wind up finding like Amon-Ra St. Brown. It's one of the best receivers in football in the fourth round. DK was a second rounder. Deebo Samuel was a second rounder. Terry McLaurin was a third rounder. There are tons of examples of it.
Mm-hmm.
The hard part is actually digging that guy out.
Yeah, you got to find him.
You got to find that.
But I would say it's like more common that you find that guy at receiver than it is at tackle. Like it's harder to find examples of guys who are 10, 15-year left tackles for teams in the third or fourth or fifth. It's not like it never happens, but it's a lot harder to find examples of that than it is to find great receivers later in the draft.
Anybody from Ohio State you see Vrabel has his eye on?
I think like there's a defensive end named Jack Sawyer who I think is going to remind Mike a lot of himself. And look, Mike's still got great relationships there. So Mike's going to have great information on the guys there because he has relationships with, people all over that program. He's one of the kings of that program. Right. So yeah, I think I think that'll definitely like exist again. Like, I think so much of it for Mike, I think is going to be like the level of information you have on the guys in year one is going to be really important because that's okay. Like this is the foundation of our culture now. And I know people roll their eyes at that stuff, but it's real. Like,
it doesn't happen overnight, but also, if
you want to use the Patriots example, like the great example to me is like, they weren't taking huge risks at the beginning with Belichick, but like in 2004, they trade for Corey Dillon. That was a risk, but at the time they'd already won 2 Super Bowls. They take the risk on Randy Moss. Akeem.
The culture was created.
Huh? Yeah. So like you were plugging guys into something that was already established. You weren't taking somebody as a character risk and asking him to be the foundation of your program. That foundation was there. Right now, like the foundation for Vrabel's program isn't built yet. So you have to, I think in year one, you always have to be more cognizant of it. Like, I think the Commanders are a fantastic example of it. Like, look what they did last year. So much of that and having the great young quarterback obviously is a huge part of it for them. But so much of it for DQ and those guys down there was like having the right types of guys and knowing exactly what you were getting. And like DQ's he's a Pete Carroll guy. It was like, I want competitors. I want guys who are edgy, who are tough, like a lot of the same things Vrabel's looking for. And like they went with guys they knew they weren't guessing on the guys they signed. They knew those guys would be exactly what they were looking for.
Right. Well, Albert, this has been fantastic. We really appreciate you taking the time, joining us here on the Rank Shrinks, talking some hockey, some parenting, some football stuff. Obviously, unbelievable insight. So thank you again, and we'll hopefully we can do it again soon.
Absolutely. Maybe you guys can give me a skating lesson too.
Yeah, I love it.
That's it. Well, keep up the great work, Albert, and I'll see you back in Duxbury in the summer.
Absolutely. Thanks, Moss. Thanks, BY.
All right. Thank you again. That interview was also brought to you by Franklin Sports, the official street hockey partner of the National Hockey League. Check out their line of NHL street hockey games and training equipment at franklinsports.com today.
Yeah, franklinsports.com. Get all your training needs for that driveway as the weather starts heating up, and also for other sports such as baseball that we all love to talk about and love to watch. This is the springtime, so they have a number of things that you can go as an athlete, as a hockey player, to make sure you check out franklinsports.com.